The goal of the Virtual Reality Data Visualization Project is to capitalize on the sense of depth and scale that consumer head-mounted displays can uniquely offer when visualizing data.
The pilot program utilizes the NetworkX library for Python in order to generate JSON objects, which are then rendered and displayed in Unreal Engine 4.
There are two ways to create a new graph. The first way is by selecting one of these buttons that pulls a random person from the database and spawns a network graph with that person as the center. Or, as in my case, you can do a manual search for someone. The person I want to look up is Mark Elliott, so I type in his name and that loads his network graph. You can see Mark is highlighted here in red, and everyone else is one of Mark's connections. Seeing the network displayed in VR as if it was in a real room gives a greater spatial understanding of the network. It is easy to distinguish cliques and clusters of nodes. Each cluster may be a department or a group of people working on a project. If I look at a person in a group, I see this one has a lot of connections. I can grow the network just by clicking on the person. This adds their connections to the network, which are highlighted in blue. If I keep following this communication trail by adding people to the graph, you can see that the colors of my old additions start to fade out, giving me a visual indication of how recent someone was added. After adding several layers to this communication trail, I want to see how direct is the connection between one of these new individuals and Mark, who is the original center for the network. By selecting the two, I can apply a shortest path algorithm between them, which highlights their communication path. I realize they don't have a very direct connection, so I hit the back button to undo my last operation. Applying a degree centrality algorithm to resize a graph makes it a lot easier to see who's communicating the most within the network. The size of each node is an indicator for the volume of information or communications going through each node. It looks like these two are the top two communicators in the network, making more connections than anyone else. I can learn more information about them just by looking at them. Here's Mark, and I see he emailed on a consistent basis through the year, except for a dip in communication during April. It's possible he went on vacation or took a short leave of absence. I can go back and read his emails to find out why. I also see he communicated with Sarah, who didn't send a single email until May, so I presume she was just hired around May. I'm really starting to get a good understanding of this network, so I can save it to one of these save slots and load it anytime later. Now I want to know who in this network has talked about traveling, so I do a search for the keyword travel, and this highlights everyone in the network who's mentioned the keyword. Right away I see that Sarah talked about traveling with a person in her communication cluster, Andrea. I look over at Andrea's communication history, and she didn't send a single email in either October or November. That must have been the time when she traveled. It would be interesting to go back and read her email history to see where she traveled to. Andrea is interesting to me. I want to focus more on her. I click on her, and this grows a new graph with Andrea as the center, here in red, and all of her connections surround her. I'm going to save Andrea's network so I can come back to it at any time. Now I can load my original network and continue to find people of interest.
Since the start of the project, our efforts have been focused primarily on creating an expandable API that allows Unreal Engine to display information from an external source. Now that the framework is in place, our aim is to increase the graph's functionality by including translations over time, different shapes and models for the nodes, and adapting our server to utilize multi-threading and cluster integration. All of these features will combine into an effective tool for network visualization and analysis.